How about I sit here until you fall asleep?
The world of Monsters Inc. clearly stands out. Like, look at this world, man. Just look at this world. Look at it. It's beautiful. Taking the concept of a whole world living behind a child's closet door, where monsters live and thrive off of scream energy, is genius, original, and crazy. Since its release in 2001, Pete Docter and his team at Pixar were able to solidify the animated feature as an instant classic, with a total gross of $577 million and an Oscar nomination. It's easy to notice that Pixar was really trying to dig deep into concepts relating to childlike notions, whether it be monsters under the bed or toys coming to life. But to take this concept and to tell a heartfelt story of exploitation, perception, parenthood, and love takes this film to a whole nother level. And that's something I've always loved about Pixar. They take these creative, childlike ideas and always find a way to tell a mature story. Almost every Pixar movie has an ending that is bittersweet and realistic. I mean, as realistic as you can get with a rat chef or a man with a flying balloon house, but you get what I mean. I remember being like an 8-year-old just touched by the relationship between Boo and Sully. There honestly wasn't anything quite like that scene where Sully puts in that last piece of wood in Boo's door and finally meets her again. It's just so bittersweet and so beautifully presented. So why am I here talking about Monsters Inc. when Mike Wazowski was arguably a side character in the movie? And don't get me wrong, he was a great side character, one of the best. He was a voice of reason that contrasted Sully, urging him to get rid of Boo throughout the story. He came off as a materialistic dude who loved his life at the start of the movie. He loved his car, he loved Celia, and he loved and valued his role at Monsters Inc. This point connects pretty well with Monsters University, but we'll get to that. As Monsters Inc. progresses, the story gets more serious as Sully and Mike get banished. Mike has an outburst on Sully, who seems to only be concerned about the well-being of Boo.
All you had to do was listen to me, just once, but you didn't, did you? You're still not listening? Ah!
I'm sure it wasn't planned or anything, but in terms of continuity from Monsters University to Monsters Inc., it's clear that Mike feels like Sully took that entire life that they had for granted. It's clear that Mike valued it way more than Sully ever would. And Mike understandably feels hurt and betrayed because everything they share together seemed to become meaningless in an instant.
Oh, we were about to break the record, Sully. We would have had it made.
None of that matters now.
None of it matters? Wait a second. None of it matters? Sully, what about everything we ever worked for? Does that matter? Huh?
I always felt like this scene in the movie was kind of overlooked. Sure, the beating heart of the film is Sully and Boo's relationship, but Mike has an incredibly interesting stance in the film. Although the conflict between Mike and Sully is solved a bit too easily and quickly, and is kind of played off for comedic purposes, the foundation of an area for character exploration is laid out that Monsters University could just dig into. And so, the movie reaches its climax as Mike and Sully expose Monsters Inc. and deliver Boo back to her room, with nothing but a wooden chip of her door as a token of remembrance of everything they've been through. And in doing so, Mike and Sully change the landscape of Monsters Inc. in its entirety. And now for one of the most feel-good scenes in any Pixar movie ever. We get to see Sully get the closure he's been wanting with Boo, all thanks to Mike. He inserts that wooden chip he's been holding onto as a memory into the door, and the movie ends with nothing but the contentment of Sully. It truly is one of the best stories ever, and it stayed with me as I got older. But I'm really not here to talk about this movie. I'm here to talk about the underrated masterpiece that is Monsters University. But before we get to that, let's quickly talk about prequels. Now, prequels have had their fair share of hits and misses. They can be as lacking as Fantastic Beasts and Where to Find Them, or groundbreaking like X-Men First Class. There was always a massive trench of error that any prequel can fall into. One of the errors may stem from the necessity or validity of a prequel. An important question that every filmmaker should ask is if a prequel is even necessary. Characters may have an amazing send-off and conclusion to their stories, and creating an unnecessary prequel may come across as a cash grab, which any film studio should avoid. Or worse, a prequel may change everything we know and love about a character, which tarnishes the entire legacy of the franchise. Getting back to the point, Monsters University avoids these factors and trenches with perfection. The prequel focuses on the attributes of a previously defined character. It elevates these characteristics and builds a solid foundation for the start of Monsters Inc. Like Mike Wazowski at the ending of Monsters University can clearly step into the shoes of Mike Wazowski at the start of Monsters Inc. Not only are the characters of the previous installment explored, but so is the environment and the world. With a completely fresh story, and with one of the most relatable protagonists I've ever seen on screen, I instantly fell in love with Monsters University. Okay, let's quickly outline what we know about Mike Wazowski from Monsters Inc. He loves his life, he loves working at Monsters Inc., and he loves Celia. I mean, I don't really blame him, but anyways, he loves success, and it bothers him way more than Sully when they lose it all. It's an interesting case of purpose, where it seems as if Sully finds a purpose in Boo, and Mike's purpose is kind of sacrificed in the pursuit of Sully's journey. Monsters University takes the traits exemplified by Mike in Monsters Inc. and asks the right questions. Why would Mike feel this way? Why would he act this way? How did he get here? And how do we explore that? Monsters University is a great deconstruction of a character with one of the most realistic endings I've ever seen, so let's break this character down. Mike Wazowski, a short, average, but courageous kid who dares to dream in just the opening minutes of the movie. We can clearly see his motivation depicted through an interaction with his classmates.
Whoa, hey guys, watch the eye! Cool, I want to be a scarer. Yeah, me too. Come on guys, I want to see. Out of the way, Wazowski. You don't belong on a scare floor.
He uses this doubt in his abilities as a drive and takes a leap forward into danger to prove himself constantly throughout the movie. Mike ventures into the human world for the first time and experiences what it means to be a real scare, and this is where our story begins. And I love how expertly crafted this scene is. It speaks volumes about what inspiration can do and how a simple gesture of encouragement can go such a long way.
That was real dangerous, kid. I didn't even know you were in there. Wow. I didn't even know you were in there. Not bad, kid.
Michael, what do you have to say for yourself?
How do I become a scarer?
This entire interaction almost went in another way for Mike when he starts to look down in shame, but he's granted the hat as a token of belief and support, and his life trajectory completely changes. So with his newfound drive and ambition, our protagonist moves forward, working to achieve his dreams and actually achieving them. I feel like in most movies, they too often show a protagonist to be either a gifted genius or a vulnerable, depressed individual. It's always an extreme. And although there can be many interesting stories told with these extremes, I haven't seen such a captivating story of just an average character. His adversary seems to be the environment he's chosen to be in. An environment where the largest and scariest monster is designed to succeed. I really connected with this unwavering belief Mike has in himself, no matter what the odds were. We then see the introduction of a well-respected character who has her own principles and values, along with Sully. Sully and Mike have an amazing relationship throughout the movie. One that starts off with hatred, jealousy, and selfishness, but grows into one of respect and friendship. Some of the most interesting characters have this dynamic. I think back to Iron Man and Tony Stark from the MCU, or Niki Lauda and James Hunt from Rush. All of these movies exemplify characters that are determined in their own way, but because they see the world only through their eyes, conflict arises between the leads. Each of these movies evolve the characters into mature individuals who have the ability to see the world through another lens. In Monsters University, we see the characters go from this to this. So looking at their relationship from the start of the movie, Sully has everything Mike has ever wanted. He's scary without trying. He's talented. And Mike is a direct contrast, being the smaller, less intimidating, but a fearless and hardworking monster. This is not to say that Mike has a low self-esteem, but it's clear that Mike and Sully won't initially ever get along because Mike has worked his entire life for something Sully simply gained through reputation.
But I'm a Sullivan.
Well then, I'm sure your family will be very disappointed.
Dan Scanlon, the writer and director of Monsters University, skillfully takes the character beats depicted in Monsters Inc., especially when the chips are down for both characters, like when they're banished, and explores why they acted the way they did. It makes total sense for Sully to take Monsters Inc. for granted when banished. He never had to work as hard as Mike did. Sure, Sully had his own journey with Boo, but the validation Mike worked so hard for, which we now see in Monsters University, is taken away from them. And the director takes the emotions and interactions between these characters and applies them in a completely new context. And as the story progresses, Mike grows more and more annoyed due to Sully's unfair advantages and arrogance.
You're not even in the same league with me.
Just wait, Hotshot. I'm gonna scare circles around you this year.
Oh, okay. I'd like to see that.
And on the other side, Sully's hatred of Mike grows as well, because he's annoyed of being embarrassed academically and being questioned by the fraternity. But what I love is that unknowingly, Sully pushes Mike to work harder to prove his worth, and later in the movie, Mike pushes Sully to become a better scarer. So as the story progresses, things go wrong between the characters when they mess up during the exam, and Mike faces an awful truth, that he just isn't good enough.
And Mr. Wazowski, what you lack is something that cannot be taught. You're not scary.
And not to sidetrack too much, but we're introduced to such an interesting antagonist that challenges Mike and Sully both. She acts out of arrogance and controlled anger so gracefully, like I'm in love. Her legs got me feeling a type of way sometimes, but aside her beautiful proportions, she has a personal relationship with the protagonist of the story. Hardscrabble points out the character's flaws, but also says some things that Mike and Sully both need to hear.
You didn't know any of that stuff to scare.
That stuff would have informed you that this particular child is afraid of snakes. So a roar wouldn't make him scream, it would make him cry, alerting his parents, exposing the monster world, destroying life as we know it, and of course we can't have that.
As the story moves forward, Mike pulls a big main character moment as he challenges Hardscrabble in front of the entire school on a game that she founded, and said that she was wrong with such confidence. Mike, Sully, and Hardscrabble all needed each other to grow, as expressed so well at the end of the movie. Sully learns to use his scaring talents in more effective ways and trust those around him and mature as a character. Hardscrabble learns to trust those around her as well, and to not make judgments as quickly as she did with Mike. And Mike, well, we have the entire essay to discuss his growth. And in any other movie, you expect the protagonist to prove how wrong the adversary is. You expect the main character to triumph. You expect him to learn from his journey and prove everyone wrong. But that's just not the case here. We learn that Sully cheats to win the game, because he doesn't think that Mike is scary enough to deliver in that final moment. And he's sort of right. I love this movie because it shows that sometimes your all just isn't enough. You just aren't enough, and that's totally okay. You just need to keep pushing forward. It's really heavy stuff, and Mike's arc was incredibly relatable to me as I watched this movie during the transition period between high school and university. I always felt extremely average, but continued to work hard as ever, making Mike a character that I instantly connected with. A dude that works hard, but doesn't always get what he wants. A great scene that really puts this into context is when Uzma Kappa goes to Monsters Inc. together for inspiration, the same place where Mike was first inspired. He shows the team how everyone has their advantages and disadvantages, but those that make the most of what they have can really accomplish something.
Take a good look, fellas. See what they all have in common?
No, not really.
Exactly. There's no one type of scarer. The best scarers use their differences to their advantage.
It's a great scene, and we finally get to see Mike and Sully bond, lose their arrogance, and gain respect for one another.
But it's not too late. We could be a great team. We just need to start working together.
And in any other movie, this scene would have been the turning point for Mike as a character. He would have used this inspiration to become one of the greats. But this just doesn't happen, and I love Pixar even more for it. The story moves on and they win the scare games, but only because Sully cheats, and it sends Mike down an even more dangerous path, one that he similarly took at the start of the movie, back into the human world, just to see the truth for himself. And even there, he just isn't able to do it. He isn't scary, he just doesn't have what it takes.
You look funny.
They really break this character down. There isn't any way he can win and get what he wants. And in his lowest moment, he has a heart-to-heart with Sully, where they talk about their fears and lift each other up, solidifying their bond.
You were right. They weren't scared of me. I did everything right. I wanted it more than anyone. And I thought if I wanted it enough, I could show everybody that Mike Wazowski is something special. Because you were born a Sullivan!
Yeah, I'm a Sullivan. I'm the Sullivan who flunked every test. The one who got kicked out of the program. The one who was so afraid to let everyone down that I cheated. And I lied. But you're not the only failure here.
How come you never told me that before?
We weren't friends before.
This movie really lets its characters breathe. It doesn't sugarcoat anything. Like, you can do everything right, you can want it more than anyone, but sometimes it's just not in your cards. And at the same time, you can be as big and as scary and have every preferable trait that you need to have, but be just as scared as anyone. And although Sully is still in a better place than Mike picks himself back up and uses the cards that he's dealt, like his knowledge and years of hard work, to pull off a record-breaking scare. And once again, the movie flips expectations by putting our protagonist through all of that, only to get expelled. And I really miss this level of realism in movies. I miss seeing the hard truth in movies. In an era where almost every single thing is sugarcoated and unrealistically feel good, and happy endings are kind of unearned, I crave this edge and realism that seems to be disappearing from media. And so the story draws to a close. Mike has given up as he sits on the same bus that brought him to his dream university, but he gets some much needed recognition and support from Sully.
You pulled off the biggest scare this school has ever seen. You're not scary. Not even a little. But you are fearless.
Followed by an unexpected push from Hardscrabble, who implicitly admits the wrongfulness in her act of condescension.
The two of you did something together that no one has ever done before. You surprised me. Perhaps I should keep an eye out for more surprises like you in my program. But as far as the two of you are concerned, there is nothing I can do for you now, except perhaps wish you luck. And Mr. Wazowski, keep surprising people.
The first time I watched this movie, I was so sure that Hardscrabble would take them back into the program, but it just wasn't in store for either Mike or Sully. And so Mike walks away from his dream, everything he's ever wanted, ever since he wore that hat, but he leaves behind a real change in Hardscrabble. He pushes her to keep an open mind and a sense of perspective. And this incredible bittersweet journey leads our characters to Monsters Inc., where Mike is a fully realized character, one who makes the most of what he has. I've loved this movie ever since I saw it in 2013, and as I got older, it resonated with me more and more. Pixar does this incredible thing with most of its movies. It ends them in the most bittersweet way possible, with characters going through life-changing journeys only to refute them of what they initially want and instead granting them something that they need. Whether it be Woody and Andy at the end of Toy Story 3, or Carl at the end of Up, or the ending of Onward, which is another Dan Scanlon feature where he instills the same bittersweet formula that I love. And watching these films as a kid, seeing my favorite characters get broken down and get back up really shaped me into who I am today. Monsters University is a highly underrated character study that speaks magnitudes about relationships, expectations, realities, and life. And I will always love it.